Our talented boxer's maid becomes pregnant with his child, but when he cruelly rejects her, his biggest rival takes her in. As love blossoms between them, they must face threats, family drama, and ultimately meet in the ring, where both men fight, not just for a title, but for the family they've unexpectedly built together. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to follow more incredible stories like this one, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. The rain poured down mercilessly on the exclusive Highland Heights neighborhood. As Maria Alvarez hurried down the wet sidewalk, her thin jacket doing little to keep her dry, her hands were shaking but not from the cold. Just minutes ago, she had stood in John McGregor's study, watching the famous boxer's face turn from shock to rage as she told him about her pregnancy. "You're lying," he had snarled, his massive fists clenching on his mahogany desk. "You planned this, didn't you, trying to trap me?" Maria's voice trembled as she replied, "No, Mr. McGregor, I would never—" "Save it!" John cut her off, standing up so suddenly his chair crashed to the floor. "You're fired! Get out of my house, now! Please," Maria begged, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "I don't want your money, I just thought you should know—" "Know what? That my maid is trying to ruin my life." John's laugh was cruel. "Nobody will believe you. You're nothing but a desperate woman looking for a payday. Now get out before I call the police." The memory of those words stung worse than the cold rain. Maria had worked for John the Titan McGregor for 3 years, cleaning his mansion, cooking his meals, and eventually falling for his charm when he started paying attention to her. She should have known better. The affair had lasted barely 2 months before he lost interest, but its consequences would last a lifetime. Lightning flashed across the sky as Maria reached the bus stop. Her phone was dead. She had no money for a cab, and the last bus had already left. Exhausted and desperate, she sat down on the wet bench and finally let her tears fall. She didn't notice the black SUV pulling up until its headlights illuminated her. Maria tensed, ready to run, when the passenger window rolled down. "Miss, are you all right?" The voice was deep but gentle, nothing like John's arrogant bark. Maria looked up to see a familiar face, James Carter, known in the boxing world as the Gentleman. She had seen him on TV, fighting in the ring and occasionally at John's parties. Though they had never spoken, his concerned expression seemed genuine. "I'm fine," Maria said quickly, wiping her eyes. "Just waiting for someone." James glanced at the empty street, then back at her. "In this weather, please let me help. It's not safe out here." Under normal circumstances, Maria would never accept a ride from a stranger, even a famous one. But these weren't normal circumstances. She was cold, scared, and out of options. "Where are you headed?" James asked as she settled into the warm car. Maria's voice caught in her throat. She had nowhere to go. Her small apartment had been provided by John as part of her employment. Without her job, she had nothing. I don't know," she admitted, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. James drove in silence for a moment, then said quietly, "I know it's not my place to ask, but does this have something to do with John McGregor?" Maria's surprise must have shown on her face because James continued, "I saw you leaving his house. I know he can be difficult." That was an understatement. John McGregor was famous for his explosive temper both in and out of the ring. His rivalry with James Carter was legendary in the boxing world, the arrogant champion versus the humble challenger, the privileged versus the self-made man. "He fired me," Maria said simply, not ready to share the whole truth. James nodded, as if this explained everything. "Listen, I have a guest house on my property. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and warm. You're welcome to stay there until you figure things out." Maria stared at him, wondering if she had heard correctly. "Why would you help me?" "Because it's the right thing to do," James replied, his eyes staying on the road. "And because I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. Before boxing, I lived on the streets. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to do the same." They drove through the stormy night. Maria couldn't stop her hands from shaking. In the span of an hour, she had lost everything. Her job, her home, her security. She was pregnant with the child of a man who had thrown her out like trash, and now she was accepting help from his biggest rival. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. James gave her a gentle smile. "Get some rest, Miss Alvarez. Tomorrow's a new day." What Maria didn't know then was that this night would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone involved. It would spark a chain of events that would rock the boxing world, challenge social prejudices, and prove that sometimes the greatest victories happen outside the ring. In the coming months, as her belly grew and her heart began to heal, Maria would learn that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who stand by you when the world turns its back. And sometimes, just sometimes, losing everything can lead you to finding something even more precious. But for now, as the SUV pulled up to James Carter's beautiful but modest home, all Maria could think about was getting out of her wet clothes and finding a moment of peace. She had no way of knowing that she had just met the man who would not only save her that night, but would eventually save her in every way a person can be saved. The rain continued to fall, but for the first time since leaving John's mansion, Maria felt something besides fear and despair. She felt hope. Inside his empty mansion, John McGregor poured himself another drink, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling in his gut. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? The girl was obviously lying, trying to trap him. He was John, the Titan McGregor. He had a reputation to protect, a legacy to build. He couldn't let some maid ruin everything he had worked for. Still, as thunder rolled across the sky, he couldn't forget the look in Maria's eyes when he had thrown her out. It wasn't the look of someone who was lying. It was the look of someone whose world had just been shattered. "It doesn't matter," he muttered to himself, downing his whiskey in one gulp. "She'll disappear. Find someone else to con. It's not my problem." But as he would soon discover, some problems don't just disappear. Sometimes they come back stronger, ready to make you face the consequences of your actions. And sometimes they come back wearing boxing gloves. The first rays of sunlight crept through the windows of James Carter's guest house, waking Maria from a restless sleep. For a moment she forgot where she was. The bed was soft, the sheets clean and fresh, nothing like the lumpy mattress in her old apartment. Then reality came crashing back. She was pregnant, jobless, and staying in the home of her former employer's biggest rival. A gentle knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Miss Alvarez, I've brought you some breakfast," James called from the other side. Maria quickly pulled on the robe he had lent her the night before. "Come in," she said, trying to smooth down her hair. James entered carrying a tray loaded with eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. He was already dressed in workout clothes, probably getting ready for his morning training. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said, setting the tray on the small table. "But my mother always said breakfast is the most important meal of the day." "Your mother sounds wise," Maria replied, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Mr. Carter, for everything. Please call me James." He hesitated for a moment. "Miss Alvarez, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I've asked my lawyer to come by later today. Whatever's going on with John, you should know your rights." Maria's hand instinctively went to her stomach. "I don't want to cause trouble." "Standing up for yourself isn't causing trouble," James said firmly. "And if John did something wrong?" "He got me pregnant," Maria blurted out, then immediately covered her mouth, shocked by her own admission. James went very still. The only sound in the room was the distant chirping of birds outside. Finally, he spoke, his voice careful and controlled. "Did he force himself on you?" "No," Maria said quickly. We were together for a while, but when I told him about the baby last night, he fired me, said I was trying to trap him." James's jaw clenched, but his voice remained gentle. "That's why you were out in the rain." Maria nodded, unable to hold back her tears. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be telling you this. You're his rival and You're just a person who deserves to be treated with respect," James interrupted. "And that child deserves a father who will take responsibility." Before Maria could respond, they heard the sound of tires on gravel. James went to the window and his expression darkened. "Stay here," he said, heading for the door. Maria followed him anyway, peeking out the guest house window. Her heart stopped when she saw John McGregor's red sports car parked in the driveway. John stepped out, looking immaculate in an expensive suit. His handsome face was twisted with anger as he spotted James walking toward him. "Where is she?" John demanded loudly. "Lower your voice," James said calmly. "You're trespassing. Don't play games with me, Carter. I know you picked her up last night. What are you trying to pull? Turn my maid against me?" "Your maid?" James's voice took on an edge Maria had never heard before. "The woman you got pregnant and threw out in the rain?" John's face paled slightly before his anger returned. "She told you that lie too?" "Come on, Carter, you're smarter than this. She's obviously trying to con us both." "The only con here is you pretending to be a man," James replied. A real man doesn't abandon his child. John took a threatening step forward. Watch your mouth. What happens between me and my staff is none of your business. You made it my business when you left a pregnant woman homeless in the middle of the night. Maria couldn't take it anymore. She rushed out of the guest house, ignoring James's warning look. Please stop, I don't want any fighting. John's eyes locked onto her, and for a moment, she saw something flicker in them. Regret? Concern? But it was quickly replaced by his usual cold arrogance. So this is your game? He sneered. Run? To my rival, try to stir up scandal. Well, good luck proving anything. It's your word against mine, sweetheart, and we both know who people will believe. Get off my property, James said, his voice deadly quiet. And if you ever come near her again, you'll what? Fight me? John laughed. Save it for the ring, Carter. That's the only place you have a chance of touching me. He turned to Maria. As for you, I hope whatever he's paying you is worth it. As John drove away, Maria felt her legs give out. James caught her before she could fall, his strong arm steadying her. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never meant to bring you into this. Hey, look at me, James said softly. You have nothing to be sorry for. He's the one who should be apologizing. Maria looked up into his kind eyes and felt something stir in her heart. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was trust, and after everything that had happened, that felt like a miracle in itself. What am I going to do? She asked, her voice small. First, you're going to eat your breakfast, James said, leading her back to the guest house. Then we're going to talk to my lawyer, and after that, he smiled reassuringly, after that we'll figure it out together. Inside the guest house, the breakfast tray waited on the table, the food now cold, but as Maria sat down, she felt warmer than she had in months. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she didn't feel alone. Meanwhile, across town, John McGregor stormed into his gym, his anger radiating off him in waves. His trainer, Eddie, looked up from the boxing ring with concern. Boss? Everything okay? Carter's interfering in my business, John growled, stripping off his suit jacket. Get the gloves, I need to hit something. As John pounded the heavy bag, his mind raced. How dare Carter get involved? How dare Maria run to him? He was John the Titan McGregor. Nobody challenged him, nobody defied him, and nobody, absolutely nobody, made him look weak. I'll show them, he muttered between punches. I'll show them all. But deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, a small voice whispered that he was making a terrible mistake. A voice that sounded suspiciously like his late mother's, reminding him that true strength isn't about power or pride, it's about doing what's right. For now, though, that voice was drowned out by the sound of his fists hitting the bag and his own angry thoughts. He had a reputation to protect, and he would do whatever it took to keep it intact. What he didn't realize was that, sometimes, protecting your reputation means losing your soul, and sometimes the biggest fights in life have nothing to do with boxing at all. 3 months had passed since that rainy night. Maria sat in James's kitchen watching him make breakfast. It had become their morning routine. He would cook while telling her about his training plans, and she would listen, offering advice about healthy meals she had learned from her grandmother. The morning peace was broken by James's manager, Tony, bursting through the door with a newspaper in his hand. His face was red with anger. Have you seen this? Tony slapped the paper on the counter. The headline read, Boxing Scandal. Carter harbors rival's pregnant ex-maid. Maria's hand flew to her now visible baby bump. James immediately moved to her side, his face hard with anger as he read the article. John's people leaked the story. Tony said, pacing the kitchen, It's all over the sports news. They're painting you as some kind of home wrecker, James, and Maria. He stopped, looking uncomfortable. They're calling me a gold digger, Maria finished quietly, having already seen the cruel comments online. They're saying I'm trying to ruin John's career by staying with his rival. James crumpled the newspaper. I'll handle this. Handle it? Tony exploded. Your reputation is on the line. The boxing commission is asking questions. Sponsors are nervous. You have a title shot coming up in 6 months, and now everyone's talking about your personal life instead of your fighting. Let them talk, James said firmly. I'm not throwing Maria out just because some gossip columnists want a scandal. Maria stood up, her legs shaking. Maybe I should leave. Find my own place. I can't let you risk everything for me. No. James's voice was gentle but firm. You're not going anywhere, not unless you want to. Tony threw up his hands. James, be reasonable. Think about your career. I am thinking about my career, James replied. and about what kind of man I want to be. A champion who turns his back on someone in need isn't a real champion at all. After Tony left, still muttering about damage control, Maria found herself crying in the garden. The roses she had helped plant were starting to bloom, adding spots of color to the spring morning. This place had become her home, and the thought of leaving made her heart ache. James found her there, sitting quietly beside her on the garden bench. "You okay?" "Why are you doing this?" Maria asked. "Tony's right, I'm ruining everything you've worked for." "You're not ruining anything," James said. "And do you want to know why I'm doing this?" He waited until she looked at him. "Because every morning when I come down for breakfast and see you in the kitchen, it feels right. Because watching you tend to these roses makes me happier than winning any fight. Because," he took a deep breath, "because I think I'm falling in love with you." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "James, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know it's complicated. With the baby and John and everything else, I just wanted you to know that you're not a burden. You're a blessing." Before Maria could respond, James's phone rang. It was his sister Lisa, sounding frantic. "Turn on the TV, Channel 7. James rushed inside with Maria following. On the screen was John McGregor, giving a press conference outside his gym. "These rumors about my relationship with a former employee are greatly exaggerated," John was saying, his media-trained smile in place. "Yes, I had to let Miss Alvarez go due to inappropriate behavior, but I wish her well." As for James Carter, his smile turned cold. "I find it interesting that he would take in my former maid right before our title fight. Makes you wonder what his real motives are." "That snake," James muttered. "Mr. McGregor," a reporter called out, "are you saying the baby isn't yours?" John's smile never wavered. "I'm saying that Miss Alvarez had many male friends during her employment. Draw your own conclusions." Maria felt like she'd been slapped. James turned off the TV, his hands shaking with rage. "He's lying," Maria whispered. There was never anyone else." "I know," James said, pulling her into a hug. "I know." That evening, as Maria prepared dinner, she had insisted on cooking, saying it helped her feel useful. She thought about James's words in the garden. Was she falling in love with him too? The way her heart raced when he was near, how safe she felt in his arms, the joy she felt at making him smile. It all pointed to one answer, but she was carrying another man's child, a man who was now publicly questioning her character, trying to destroy both her reputation and James's. How could she drag James further into this mess? The sound of a car pulling up interrupted her thoughts. Through the kitchen window, she saw Lisa, James's sister, rushing toward the house. From the look on her face, something was wrong. "James!" Lisa burst into the kitchen. "The boxing commission, they're investigating you." "What?" James appeared from his home gym, towel around his neck. "Someone filed a complaint," Lisa explained, catching her breath. "They're saying you're using Maria to psychologically manipulate John before the fight. They're threatening to cancel the title match." Maria felt her knees go weak. This was all her fault. Everything James had worked for was falling apart because of her. But before she could voice these thoughts, James spoke up. "Let them investigate. I have nothing to hide." "James," Maria started, "I can't let you." He crossed the kitchen and took her hands in his. "Stop. Whatever you're thinking, stop. We're in this together now." "But your title shot is just a fight," James finished. "There will be other fights, but there's only one you." Lisa watched this exchange with tears in her eyes. "You really love her, don't you?" "Yeah," James said, not taking his eyes off Maria. "I really do." Outside, the spring evening was turning to dusk, the last rays of sunlight painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In his massive mansion across town, John McGregor watched. The same sunset, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The press conference had gone perfectly. His PR team had made sure of that. So why did he feel so hollow? On his desk sat an ultrasound picture. One of his private investigators had managed to get a copy from Maria's doctor's office. In the grainy black and white image, he could make out the shape of a tiny face. His child, his blood. "It doesn't matter," he told himself, turning the picture face down. "The only thing that matters is winning." But as he turned away from the window, John couldn't shake the feeling that he was already losing the most important fight of his life. The fight to be a good man. The Boxing Commission's hearing room was packed with reporters and photographers. Maria sat in the back, trying to make herself invisible as James faced the panel of stern-faced officials. Her baby bump, now 5 months along, made her feel even more conspicuous. "Mr. Carter," the head commissioner began, "you understand why we're here today?" James stood tall in his suit, looking more formal than Maria had ever seen him. "Yes, sir, though I believe these accusations are completely unfounded." "Unfounded?" A younger commissioner leaned forward. "You're housing the pregnant ex-girlfriend of your upcoming opponent. The same opponent you're scheduled to fight for the World Championship in 4 months. You don't see how this could be interpreted as psychological warfare." "The only warfare here," James replied calmly, "is what John McGregor is waging against the mother of his child." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carter," the head commissioner said. "Do you have proof that the child is Mr. McGregor's?" Before James could answer, the hearing room doors burst open. A tall, elegant woman in her 60s strode in, her silver hair perfectly styled and her expensive suit immaculate. Maria heard several people gasp. "I believe I can help with that," the woman announced. James's lawyer jumped to his feet. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" "Eleanor McGregor," the woman replied, causing another wave of murmurs. "John McGregor's mother, and I have something to say." John, who had been sitting silently with his legal team, went pale. "Mother, what are you doing here?" Eleanor ignored him, walking to the center of the room. "I've sat back and watched this circus for too long. My son," she turned to look at John, her disappointment evident, "has not been honest with you, or with himself." "Mrs. McGregor," the head commissioner started, "this is highly irregular." "I was there," Eleanor continued firmly. "The night Maria told John about the baby. I was in the house and I heard everything. I heard my son throw this poor girl out into the rain. I heard him deny his own child." The room erupted in chaos. Reporters started shouting questions. John's lawyers huddled around him, speaking urgently. James stayed perfectly still, his eyes on Maria. "Mother, please." John stood up, his face a mixture of anger and shame. "Don't do this. I raised you better than this, John Michael McGregor." Eleanor's voice cracked with emotion. "Your father would be ashamed of what you've become." The mention of his father seemed to hit John like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair, looking suddenly old and tired. Eleanor turned to the commissioners. "I have here written testimony about what I witnessed that night, along with copies of security camera footage from our house showing Maria's departure in the rain and subsequent text messages between my son and his PR team discussing how to handle the situation." As Eleanor's evidence was presented, Maria felt James's hand slip into hers. She hadn't even noticed him moving to her side. "It's going to be okay," he whispered. 3 hours later, they sat in James's kitchen. The hearing had ended with the Boxing Commission clearing James of any wrongdoing and announcing an investigation into John's conduct instead. The title fight was still on, but now the story had completely changed. "I can't believe his mother did that," Maria said, still in shock. "Eleanor McGregor has always been known for her integrity," James replied, making them both tea. "Unlike her son." The doorbell rang. When James opened it, Eleanor McGregor herself stood there. "May I come in?" she asked politely. "I'd like to speak with Maria." James looked at Maria, who nodded. Eleanor settled gracefully into a kitchen chair, her eyes fixing on Maria's baby bump. "First," Eleanor said, "I want to apologize. I should have spoken up that night. I should have stopped John, helped you somehow, but I was—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I was a coward. I told myself it wasn't my business that John would come to his senses. I was wrong. Why did you help us now?" Maria asked. Softly, "Because I couldn't bear it anymore," Eleanor replied. "Watching my son destroy himself with his pride, watching him deny his own child, and then seeing how Mr. Carter here has behaved, showing the kind of honor and decency that I tried to instill in John." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "Sometimes doing the right thing means standing against your own family." "What will John do now?" James asked. "He's angry," Eleanor sighed, "embarrassed. But maybe finally he'll be forced to face his actions. I'm not giving up on him yet." After Eleanor left, promising to stay in touch, Maria went out to the garden. The summer air was heavy with the scent of roses. James found her there, just like he always did. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I'm thinking about family," Maria said. "About how sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into." James took her hand, placing it over her belly where their future was growing. "Speaking of family, I've been wanting to ask you something." Maria's heart skipped a beat as James slid off the bench onto one knee. "I know this isn't conventional, he said, pulling out a small velvet box. "And I know people will talk, but I love you, Maria Alvarez. I love this baby, whether it's mine by blood or not. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving that love to you both." Tears streamed down Maria's face as James opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Before Maria could answer, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Eleanor. "John's been in an accident. He's asking for you." The ring sparkled in the fading sunlight as Maria looked from her phone to James, her heart torn between her future and her past, between the man who loved her and the father of her child. Across town, in a hospital room, John McGregor lay in bed, his car accident finally forcing him to be still, to think about his life and his choices. The painkillers couldn't numb the real pain, the knowledge that he had become everything he had once despised, a coward, a liar, a man who ran from responsibility. "I need to make this right," he whispered to the empty room. "I have to make this right." But sometimes doing the right thing comes too late. And sometimes the choices we make in moments of crisis define us more than all our carefully planned decisions. As night fell over the city, 3 hearts beat with uncertainty. Maria's on the garden bench, James's on his knee, and John's in his hospital bed. The next few hours would change their lives forever, but none of them could know just how. The hospital corridors seemed endless as Maria hurried toward John's room, James's engagement ring still in its box, clutched tightly in her hand. She hadn't given him an answer yet. Couldn't give him an answer until she dealt with this. James had understood, of course. He always understood. "I'll drive you," he had said, but Maria shook her head. "I need to do this alone," she had told, him touching his cheek gently. "Wait for me, always," he had replied. Now, standing outside John's hospital room, Maria took a deep breath. Eleanor was there, looking tired but composed. "How is he?" Maria asked. "Physically? Some broken ribs, a concussion and a broken leg. But mentally," Eleanor shook her head. "The doctors say he was drinking. He wrapped his car around a tree after leaving a bar." Maria's hand went to her stomach protectively. "Was anyone else hurt?" "Thank God, no. He's awake now, asking for you. But Maria," Eleanor touched her arm. "You don't have to go in there if you don't want to." "Yes, I do." John looked smaller somehow, lying in the hospital bed. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a vulnerability Maria had never seen before. His face was bruised, his leg in a cast. "Maria," he said hoarsely when he saw her. "You came. Your mother called me." Maria stayed near the door, unsure. "I saw the ring," John said, surprising her. At her confused look, he added, "It's all over social media. Carter proposing in his garden. Paparazzi must have been watching." Maria's hand tightened around the ring box in her pocket. "John, wait," he interrupted. "Please, I need to say something." He struggled to sit up straighter, wincing in pain. "I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough, but I'm sorry." "For everything." Maria felt tears forming in her eyes. "Why now?" "Because I almost died tonight," John replied, his voice shaking. "And all I could think about was what a mess I've made of everything. My mother was right. My father would be ashamed of me." "Your father? He was like Carter, you know." John gave a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "Honorable, decent, always doing the right thing. I wanted to be stronger than him, but instead I became weak, the kind of man who abandons his child." Maria moved closer to the bed, drawn by the raw pain in his voice. "The baby," John said, looking at her growing belly. I want to be part of its life, if you'll let me, not as a replacement for Carter. I can see how he looks at you, how you look at him, but as a father, a real one." Before Maria could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. She heard James's voice, angry and urgent. "You can't print that. It's private." Eleanor rushed out to investigate, returning moments later looking grave. "The press has photos of Maria coming to the hospital. They're running stories about a love triangle drama and speculating about the proposal. They're saying Carter's championship fight might be cancelled again," added Tony, who had appeared behind Eleanor. "The publicity is out of control." Maria felt overwhelmed. Everything was spinning out of control. Her private life splashed across the media, 2 men she cared about in pain, a baby on the way, and a decision that would affect all their lives. "I can't do this," she whispered, backing toward the door. "I can't." She ran, ignoring the calls behind her, through the hospital corridors, past the crowd of reporters outside, into the warm night air, She ran until she reached the small chapel in the hospital garden. Inside it was quiet, peaceful. Maria sank onto a wooden bench, finally letting her tears fall. She pulled out the ring box, opening it to see the diamond sparkle in the dim light. "I thought I might find you here." Maria looked up to see Eleanor in the chapel doorway. "How did you know?" "Because this is where I came when I had to make the hardest decision of my life," Eleanor said, sitting beside her. "When I had to choose between staying with John's father or leaving him." "You left?" Eleanor nodded. "He was a good man who made bad choices. Drinking, gambling. I loved him, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to choose what's best for your child." Maria touched her belly. "How did you know what was right?" "I listened to my heart," Eleanor replied simply. "Not what others expected, not what seemed easiest, but what I knew deep down was true." She patted Maria's hand. "And now you must do the same." As if on cue, Maria's phone lit up with a text from James. "Whatever you decide, know that I love you. Both of you." In that moment, looking at those words, Maria knew what she had to do. Standing up, she squared her shoulders and headed back into the hospital. She found both men waiting anxiously, John in his hospital bed, James in the hallway. Both looked up when they saw her, their faces showing different kinds of love, different kinds of pain. "I've made my decision," Maria said quietly. The summer night pressed against the hospital windows, the world holding its breath as Maria prepared to speak words that would change all their lives forever. In the chapel garden, crickets chirped their evening song, unaware of the drama unfolding. Inside, and somewhere in the city, reporters waited with their cameras and their headlines, ready to turn private pain into public spectacle. But Maria wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about love, not the simple kind that romance novels describe, but the complicated, messy, real kind that forces us to grow, to change, to become better versions of ourselves. She looked at John, then at James, and began to speak her truth. "Yes," Maria said firmly, her eyes fixed on James. "Yes, I'll marry you." The tension in the hospital hallway could have been cut with a knife. James's face lit up with joy, while John closed his eyes, accepting the inevitable. "But," Maria continued, turning to John, "I want you to be part of your child's life. If you're serious about changing, about being a real father, then we can work something out." John opened his eyes, looking surprised and grateful. "You mean that?" "I do," Maria replied. "This baby deserves to know both its fathers, the one who gave it life and the one who chose to love it from the start." James stepped forward, taking Maria's hand. "We'll make it work," he said, looking at John, "for the baby's sake." The moment was interrupted by Tony bursting into the room, waving his phone. "Have you seen the news? They're saying the championship fight is back on. The Boxing Commission just released a statement supporting both fighters." "The fight?" John looked confused. "After everything that's happened? The public loves it," Tony explained excitedly. "The reformed bad boy versus the honorable challenger, fighting for more than just a title. The ratings will be through the roof." "No," Maria said firmly, surprising everyone. "You're not turning our lives into some circus show." "But," Tony started. "She's right," James interrupted. "This isn't about ratings or publicity. This is about family." John struggled to sit up in his bed. "The fight should happen," he said, his voice stronger than before. "Not for the publicity, but because it needs to. One last time in the ring, to settle things between us. After that," he looked at Maria's belly, "after that we focus on what really matters." 2 weeks later, Maria stood in front of the mirror in James's house, soon to be their house, adjusting her wedding dress. It was a simple white sundress, perfect for the small garden ceremony they had planned. Her baby bump was proudly visible, now 6 months along. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said from the doorway. She had become like a mother to Maria over the past weeks, helping with wedding plans and baby preparations. "Thank you," Maria smiled, "for everything." "I have something for you," Eleanor said, pulling out a small box. Inside was a delicate pearl necklace. "It was my grandmother's. She wore it at her wedding and I wore it at mine. I want you to have it." As Eleanor fastened the necklace around Maria's neck, they heard cars pulling up outside. "The guests are arriving," Eleanor said. "Are you ready?" Maria took one last look in the mirror. "Yes," she said confidently, "I'm ready." The garden was beautiful, decorated with the roses Maria had planted, and white ribbons flowing in the summer breeze. The guest list was small, just close friends and family. Even John was there, still in his wheelchair but healing well, sitting quietly at the back. As Maria walked down the garden path toward James, she remembered that rainy night that had changed everything. How lost and alone she had felt, how desperate. Now, looking at the man waiting for her with love in his eyes, she felt nothing but peace. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When James said his vows, promising to love not just Maria but her child as his own, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even John was seen wiping away tears. At the small reception afterward, John wheeled himself over to the newlyweds. "Congratulations," he said sincerely. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Maria." "Thank you, John," Maria replied softly. "Carter," John turned to James, "take care of them." "I will," James promised. "And John, the fight's in 2 months. Get well. I want you at your best." John nodded, a ghost of his old competitive spirit flickering in his eyes. "Count on it." Later that evening, as the sun set over the garden and the last guests were leaving, Maria and James danced slowly among the roses. Her head rested on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "Happy?" James asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," Maria replied, "but also worried about the fight." "Hey," James lifted her chin gently. "Whatever happens in that ring, nothing changes between us. This, you, me, our baby, this is what matters." Maria touched her belly, feeling the baby kick as if in agreement. "Our baby," she repeated, loving how those words sounded. Across town in his empty mansion, John sat in his wheelchair looking at old photos. Pictures of his father in the boxing ring, of his mother smiling proudly, of himself as a young boy with dreams of being a champion. "I let you down, Dad," he whispered, "but I'm going to make it right. Not just in the ring, but in life, I promise." The summer night wrapped around the city like a warm blanket, holding all their hopes, fears, and dreams. In 2 months, James and John would face each other in the ring for the championship, but the real victory had already been won, not with fists, but with hearts brave enough to choose love over pride, forgiveness over anger, and family over fame. As Maria fell asleep in James's arms that night, she thought about the strange path that had led her here, how sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead us to our greatest happiness, how family isn't always about blood, but about choice, and how love, real love, can heal even the deepest wounds. The baby kicked again, as if sending its own message of hope for the future, a future that would be complicated, messy, and beautiful, just like life itself. But for now, in this moment, everything was perfect. Meanwhile, in his home gym, James looked at the calendar marked with his training schedule leading up to the big fight. He knew that despite John's apparent change of heart, the man was still a dangerous opponent. The championship bout would be the fight of his life. But as he heard Maria's soft breathing from their bedroom, James smiled. He had already won the most important fight. The fight for love, for family, for the kind of man he wanted to be. The real question was, when the bell rang and he faced John in the ring, would both men remember what truly mattered? Or would old rivalries and the roar of the crowd drown out the quiet wisdom they had learned through love? 1 month before the championship fight, Maria woke up to find James's side of the bed empty. The clock read 4:30 a.m. Following the sounds of punching, she made her way to the home gym in her robe, her 7-month pregnant belly making her movements slower. James was there, bathed in sweat, pounding the heavy bag with an intensity that scared her. He hadn't noticed her watching. "You should be sleeping," she said softly. James stopped, breathing hard. "Had a dream about the fight. Want to talk about it?" He grabbed a towel, wiping his face. "I was in the ring with John, but every time I tried to hit him, I saw you. Saw our baby. Saw everything we could lose if something goes wrong." Maria walked over and took his hand, placing it on her belly where the baby was kicking. "Feel that? That's your child. Not by blood, but by choice. Nothing can change that." "John's been looking good in training," James said, his worry showing through. "The accident, it changed something in him. He's fighting different now, like he has nothing to lose." "And you have everything to lose?" Maria guessed. "Is that what's worrying you?" Before James could answer, his phone buzzed. It was a text from John. "Need to talk, coffee important." 2 hours later, James sat across from John at a quiet diner. John's leg cast was off, though he still walked with a slight limp. Both men had baseball caps pulled low, trying to avoid recognition. Thanks for meeting me, John said, stirring his coffee. There's something you need to know. What is it? Someone approached my trainer yesterday, offered him money to mess with your water during the fight. Add something to make you sluggish. James felt his blood run cold. What did he say? He told them no, of course. Reported it to the boxing commission. John leaned forward. But that's not all. They threatened him. Said if he didn't play along, they'd make sure he never worked in boxing again. Who are these people? Sports betting syndicate, probably. There's millions riding on this fight. More now with all the publicity about... John gestured vaguely, meaning their situation with Maria. Why are you telling me this? John met his eyes. Because I want to win, Carter. But I want to win fair. After everything, I need to prove something. To myself, to Maria, to our kid. Our kid? James raised an eyebrow. You know what I mean, John said quickly. You're going to be its father. I'm trying to be someone it won't be ashamed of. The conversation was interrupted by breaking news on the diner's TV. Both men looked up to see Maria's face on the screen. The headline read, "Boxer's Bride in Danger." The reporter was saying, sources close to the situation claim that Maria Carter, now 7 months pregnant, has received threatening letters warning her to stay away from the upcoming championship fight. The identity of the sender remains unknown. James was already on his feet, phone in hand, but Maria wasn't answering. I'll call my security team, John said, standing up. Get them to your house. They rushed out together, former rivals now united by a common fear. When they reached James's house, they found police cars already there. Maria was sitting in the kitchen with Eleanor, looking pale but composed. I'm fine, she said as soon as she saw them. Really, the letters were they were stupid threats. The police say it's probably just an obsessed fan. Show me, both men said simultaneously. Maria handed over a plastic evidence bag containing 3 letters. The messages were cut from magazines, warning her that she was ruining everything and demanding she disappear before the fight. You're coming to stay with me, Eleanor announced. My house has the best security system in the city. No arguments, she added when Maria started to protest. She's right, James said, still reading the letters with shaking hands. Just until we figure out who's behind this. Both of you need to focus on training, Eleanor continued. I'll take care of Maria and my grandchild. John looked up sharply at the word grandchild. It was the first time his mother had referred to the baby that way. Later that night, after Maria was settled in Eleanor's guest room, she found herself unable to sleep. The baby was active, kicking as if sensing her anxiety. Can't sleep either. Eleanor appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. It's all such a mess. Maria sighed, accepting the tea. The fight, the threats, everything. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being selfish, letting them go through with it. Selfish? Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed. Maria, you're the least selfish person I know. You've thought of everyone but yourself through this whole situation. But the fight. If something happens, listen to me, Eleanor said firmly. Those 2 men need this fight. Not for the title, not for pride, but for closure. To prove to themselves and each other that they can be better men than they were. And the threats are from cowards who hide behind anonymous letters. Eleanor patted her hand. We're stronger than that. Across town, in his training camp, John was reviewing fight footage of James's previous matches when his trainer, Eddie, came in. Boss, there's something else about those guys who tried to bribe me. Meanwhile, at his own gym, James was hitting the speed bag, trying to work out his frustration when Tony burst in. James! The betting odds just changed dramatically. Someone's putting huge money against you. This isn't looking good. The autumn night settled over the city, cool and clear, as 3 households stayed awake, wrestling with their fears. Maria in Eleanor's guest room, one hand on her belly, praying for the safety of both men. James in his suddenly empty home, watching old videos of his first amateur fights, remembering why he fell in love with boxing. And John in his training camp, staring at a sonogram picture of his child while making a decision that would change everything. The championship fight was 4 weeks away, but the real battle, for love, for redemption, for the future, was already underway. And like the gathering storm clouds on the horizon, no one could predict how it would end. In the quiet hours, before dawn, Maria finally drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a future where all of this was behind them, where her child could know both its fathers without fear or conflict, where love truly had conquered all. But sometimes before the light can break through, the darkness must become complete. And the greatest tests of love often come when we least expect them, in ways we never imagined. The storm was coming. The only question was who would be left standing when it passed. 2 weeks before the fight, John McGregor sat in his car outside Eleanor's house, watching Maria through the kitchen window as she helped his mother prepare dinner. His phone buzzed again, another message from the mysterious number that had been threatening him for days. "Pull out of the fight or the girl gets hurt. Final warning." John deleted the message, adding it to the growing list he hadn't told anyone about. He'd been handling the threats alone, not wanting to worry Maria or give James another reason to be distracted. But now, his thoughts were interrupted by a knock on his car window. It was Eddie, his trainer, looking nervous. "Boss, we need to talk. I found out who's behind the betting scandal." Inside Eleanor's house, Maria was showing Eleanor how to make her grandmother's empanadas when James arrived for dinner. It had become their nightly routine, everyone gathering at Eleanor's trying to maintain some normalcy despite the security guards outside and the growing tension in the air. "Any news about the letters?" Maria asked as James kissed her cheek. "Police are still investigating," he replied, but something in his voice made her suspicious. "What aren't you telling me?" James hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "Tony found this online. Someone's been posting personal details about your daily routine, when you go to doctor's appointments, which stores you shop at." Maria's hand trembled as she read the posts. "They've been watching me. We're increasing security," James said firmly, "and after dinner we need to talk, all of us. Something's not right about this whole situation." The dinner table was tense despite Eleanor's attempts at light conversation. John kept checking his phone, James seemed lost in thought, and Maria could feel the baby moving restlessly, as if sensing the anxiety in the room. Finally, Eleanor put down her fork. "All right, enough. Whatever's going on, let's hear it." John spoke first. "Eddie found out who's trying to fix the fight. It's Richard Knox." James's head snapped up. "Knox, your old manager?" "The one I fired. Last year when I caught him skimming from my accounts," John confirmed. "He's working with some big betting syndicate now. They've got millions riding on this fight." The threatening letters, Maria realized. "They're from him?" "Probably," John nodded. "Knox always liked playing mind games. But there's more." He looked at James. "They're not just betting against you, they're betting I won't finish the fight." The room went quiet as the implications sank in. "They want you to take a dive," James said slowly. "After a few rounds, make it look good," John confirmed. "But if I don't," he finally pulled out his phone, showing them the threatening messages he'd been receiving. Maria read them, her face going pale. "John, why didn't you tell us?" "Because I was ashamed," he admitted. "Knox knows all my weaknesses, all my secrets. He knows things that could hurt people I care about." Eleanor reached for her son's hand. "What kind of secrets?" Before John could answer, the sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Something had been thrown through the dining room window. "Get down!" James shouted, pulling Maria to the floor as John shielded his mother. The object was a brick with a note attached. As security guards rushed in, James retrieved it, reading aloud, "Final chance. Take the dive or she loses everything." Maria clutched her belly protectively as James helped her up. What did they mean, loses everything? John's face had gone ashen. "Knox has proof that I falsified some medical records years ago. If that gets out—" "What medical records?" Eleanor demanded. "Maria's work permit," John whispered. "When I hired her, it wasn't entirely legal. Knox helped arrange it. If he exposes that now, they could deport me." Maria finished, her voice shaking. "Even though I'm married to James now, if they prove fraud—" James's fists clenched. "I won't let that happen. None of us will," Eleanor said firmly. She turned to her son. "John, it's time to come clean about everything." Over the next hour, John revealed the full extent of Knox's corruption, the fraudulent documents, the money laundering, the fixed fights. Knox had been running his scheme for years, using John's reputation and success to cover his tracks. "So what do we do?" Maria asked when he finished. "We fight back," James said, "but not in the ring, not yet." "What do you mean?" "Knox thinks he can control us through fear," James explained, "but he's forgotten something important." "What's that?" John asked. "We're family now," James said simply. "Messed up, complicated, but family, and family protects its own." Later that night, after making plans and calling in favors from trusted friends, Maria stood in Eleanor's garden. The baby was especially active, kicking as if ready to join the fight. "Hey there, little one," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "You've got quite a family waiting for you. 2 fathers who are finally learning to be good men, a grandmother who's stronger than she knows, and a mama who's not going anywhere." I promise." James found her there, wrapping his arms around her. From behind, "Penny, for your thoughts." "I was just thinking about how strange life is," she replied, leaning back against him. "A year ago, I was just a maid with a crush on the wrong man. Now I'm married to the right one, carrying a baby that has 2 fathers, and in the middle of some crazy boxing scandal. Regrets? Not one," she said firmly. "But James, promise me something. Anything. When you face John in the ring, remember this moment. Remember that our baby needs both of you. Fight fair, fight clean, but both of you come back to us." In his training camp across town, John sat looking at the latest threatening message from Knox. With trembling fingers, he pressed delete, then dialed another number. "FBI, my name is John McGregor. I'd like to report a crime." The pieces were set, the plan in motion. But as the autumn wind rustled through Eleanor's garden, carrying the scent of approaching winter, no one could predict how this dangerous game would end. 2 weeks until the fight. 2 weeks to expose the truth, protect their family, and prove that love really could conquer all. But first, they had to survive what was coming. And Richard Knox wasn't a man who gave up easily. He had one more card to play, a secret so explosive it could tear their newly formed family apart forever. 1 week before the fight, Maria sat in the FBI's downtown office, her hand protectively over her 8-month pregnant belly. James and John flanked her like guards, while Eleanor held her other hand. They were all watching the TV mounted on the wall, where Richard Knox's arrest was being broadcast live. "Breaking news," the reporter announced. "Sports manager Richard Knox has been arrested on multiple charges of fraud, extortion, and match fixing. Sources say the investigation was triggered by information provided by heavyweight champion John McGregor." "It's over," James said softly, squeezing Maria's shoulder. But John shook his head. "Not yet. Knox has one more press conference before they take him to jail. He's already promised to tell all." As if on cue, the TV showed Knox being led to a podium in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his usually sleek hair disheveled, but his eyes still held that dangerous gleam. "Ladies and gentlemen," Knox began, "I've been accused of various crimes. Some of these accusations are true, but there's something else the public needs to know. A secret about John McGregor and his ex-maid's baby." Maria's grip on Eleanor's hand tightened. "The child she's carrying," Knox continued with a cruel smile, "isn't John McGregor's at all." The room went silent. Maria felt her heart stop. "What?" John whispered. "I have proof," Knox announced. "Medical records showing that John McGregor has been sterile since a childhood illness. He couldn't possibly be the father. This whole drama, this touching story of redemption, it's all been a lie." The press room erupted in chaos. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. In the FBI office, all eyes turned to Maria. "Is it true?" John asked, his voice hollow. "Did you know?" "No." Maria stood up, tears streaming down her face. I wouldn't." "The medical records," Eleanor said suddenly. "John, remember when you were 12? That terrible fever?" John's face showed dawning recognition. "The doctors said there might be complications later in life, but I never got tested. I never thought." "So it's true?" James asked gently. Before anyone could respond, Maria doubled over in pain, crying out. "The baby!" Eleanor exclaimed. "It's coming!" The next few hours were a blur of hospital corridors, medical staff and pain. Maria was rushed into delivery while the media circus exploded outside. News of Knox's revelation had spread like wildfire, overshadowing even his own arrest. At the waiting room, John paced frantically. "I should have known. All these years, I never even thought to check." "Stop," Eleanor said firmly. "This changes nothing about who you are or what you've done. Whether that baby shares your DNA or not, you've chosen to be its father. That's what matters." James sat quietly watching them both. Finally, he spoke. "John, when Maria told you she was pregnant, you threw her out. You denied the baby, denied her. But now, finding out it might not be yours biologically, why does this hurt you more?" John stopped pacing, struck by the question. Because this time it's not my choice. Before, I chose to be a coward. I could have chosen differently. But this feels like having that choice taken away." "Now you know how Maria felt that night," Eleanor said softly. "Having her choices taken away." Before John could respond, a doctor emerged. "The baby's coming. Mrs. Carter is asking for both of them." Inside the delivery room, Maria was fighting through another contraction when James and John entered. She reached for both their hands. I'm sorry, she gasped. I never knew, never thought. Shh, James soothed, wiping her forehead. It doesn't matter. He's right, John said, surprising them both. Whatever Knox's records show, whatever a DNA test might say, I've already lost this baby once through my own stupidity. I won't lose it again because of some medical report. Maria's next contraction hit hard. The doctor's voice was calm but urgent. Push, Mrs. Carter, your baby's almost here. Outside the delivery room, Eleanor paced the hallway where she had once walked with John's father, waiting for their own son to be born. Now she was about to become a grandmother, in circumstances none of them could have imagined. Her phone buzzed, another news alert about Knox. He was claiming to have more revelations, more secrets to expose. But looking through the delivery room window, watching her son hold Maria's hand while she brought new life into the world, Eleanor knew that Knox had already lost. Because the truth he'd thought would destroy them had only made them stronger. Hours ticked by, the autumn sun set and rose again, and finally, in the first light of morning, a baby's cry echoed through the hospital corridors. The doctor's voice was thick with emotion. Congratulations, you have a beautiful baby girl. Maria held her daughter, tears flowing freely as she looked at the tiny face. James and John stood on either side of the bed, both men crying unashamedly. She's perfect, James whispered. She is, John agreed, then clearing his throat. The fight's in 6 days. If you want to postpone. No, James said firmly. We finish this. For her. Maria looked up at them both, her husband and her baby's biological father, one-time rivals turned unlikely family. Promise me you'll both come back to her. We promise, they said in unison. As Eleanor entered the room to meet her granddaughter, none of them noticed the TV in the corner, where Knox was being led away to jail. His last attempt to destroy them had failed. Love, it seemed, was stronger than any secret, but the final test still awaited. In 6 days, James and John would meet in the ring, and while they had promised to both come back to the baby, in boxing as in life, not all promises can be kept. The real question was, when the bell rang for the championship fight, would they remember this moment, or would the roar of the crowd and the heat of battle make them forget what truly mattered? As the baby girl wrapped her tiny hand around John's finger while resting in James's arms, the answer seemed clear. But in 6 days, everything would be on the line, and sometimes the hardest fights are the ones we wage against ourselves. The night of the championship fight arrived with an electricity in the air that had nothing to do with the weather. Madison Square Garden was packed to the rafters, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. This wasn't just a boxing match anymore, it was a story that had captured the nation's attention. In the family section, Maria sat with baby Sophia, born just 6 days ago. Eleanor was beside her, both women trying to stay calm despite their fears. The baby was peaceful, unaware that both her fathers were about to face each other in the ring. They'll be fine, Eleanor said, squeezing Maria's hand. They promised. In the locker rooms, both men prepared differently. James sat quietly, looking at a photo of Maria and Sophia on his phone. John shadowboxed in front of the mirror, his eyes focused and clear for the first time in years. When the call came for the fighters to make their way to the ring, a strange calm settled over the arena. The usual booing and cheering was replaced by an almost reverent silence, as first James, then John, made their entrances. They met in the center of the ring for the referee's instructions. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, both men remembered the tiny hand that had gripped their fingers less than a week ago. Clean fight, the referee reminded them. Touch gloves. Instead of the usual quick tap, they held the glove touch. For a moment longer, a silent understanding passed between them. The bell rang. The first round was tentative, both men fighting cautiously, professionally. They had too much respect for each other now to be reckless. The crowd, expecting blood and drama, began to grow restless. They're holding back, Tony complained from James's corner between rounds. No, James replied, taking a sip of water. We're fighting smart. In John's corner, Eddie was saying much the same thing. You've got to let go, boss. Forget everything else and fight. John just shook his head, his eyes finding Maria and Sophia in the crowd. The middle rounds were a masterclass in technical boxing. Both men showcased their skills, trading punches, blocking, moving with a grace that had the boxing purists in the crowd nodding in appreciation. There was no hatred here, no desire to destroy, just two athletes at the peak of their craft. But in the 8th round, everything changed. John landed a hard right that sent James staggering. The crowd roared to life. For a moment, the old John McGregor emerged, the killer instinct taking over as he moved in for the finish. Maria clutched Sophia tighter, her heart in her throat. James weathered the storm, clinching when he had to, showing the heart that had made him a champion. When the round ended, both men were breathing hard. "This ends now," James said as they passed each other returning to their corners. John nodded. Together. The 9th round was what everyone had come to see. Both men threw caution to the wind, trading punches in the center of the ring. Left hooks, right crosses, body shots. They held nothing back. This wasn't about hatred anymore. It was about respect, about proving to themselves and each other that they deserved to be there. With 30 seconds left in the round, they both landed simultaneously, James's left hook meeting John's right cross in a thunderous collision. Both men went down. The crowd went wild as the referee began counting. Maria stood up, Eleanor taking Sophia as she pressed her hands to her mouth. 7, 8. James stirred first, struggling to his knees. 9. John pushed himself up using the ropes for support. Both men made it to their feet at the count of 9.5. The referee looked them over carefully, then let the fight continue just as the bell rang. In the 1-minute break before the final round, both corners tried desperately to revive their fighters. But James and John were looking past their trainers, past the crowd to the family section where Maria sat with their daughter. The bell rang for the 10th and final round. What happened next would be talked about in boxing circles for years to come. Instead of charging at each other, James and John met in the center of the ring and began boxing with a pure, almost beautiful technical precision. Every punch was thrown with perfect form, every defense executed flawlessly. This wasn't a brawl, it was art. With 10 seconds left, they both knew what had to happen. Their eyes met again, and without a word, they began throwing their best punches. James's hook caught John on the jaw, just as John's straight right landed flush on James's chin. For the second time, both men went down. The referee didn't even start counting. The bell rang, ending the fight. The crowd was on its feet, roaring their appreciation for what they had just witnessed. The judges' scorecards were almost an afterthought. James won by a single point, retaining his title. But as the ring announcer read out the decision, something unprecedented happened. John moved to James's corner and raised his rival's hand himself. Then James took his championship belt and held it up between them, both men sharing the moment of victory. Maria made her way to the ring with Sophia, Eleanor helping her up the steps. The baby was passed from James to John, both men battered but beaming with pride. "Now that," John said, touching his daughter's cheek gently, "was worth fighting for." Weeks later, they all gathered in James and Maria's garden. The roses were blooming one last time before winter. Sophia lay in a bassinet, while her two fathers took turns watching over her. The DNA test results lay unopened on the table. They had decided together that it didn't matter. "You know," Eleanor said, bringing out a tray of lemonade, "when I imagined becoming a grandmother, I never pictured anything like this." Maria smiled, watching James and John arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to change the baby. "Life never turns out quite like we expect, does it?" "No," Eleanor agreed. "Sometimes it turns out better." The garden was peaceful in the late autumn sunshine. The boxing world had moved on to new dramas, new fights. Richard Knox was serving time for his crimes. And here, in this quiet corner of the world, an unlikely family had found their own kind of happiness. James came over to kiss Maria while John cradled Sophia, both men's faces still showing fading bruises from the fight, but their eyes were clear and bright, full of love for the little girl who had changed everything. "Think she'll want to be a boxer?" John asked, only half joking. "Over my dead body," Maria replied firmly, making them all laugh. As the day wound down and stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Maria thought about that rainy night that seemed so long ago now. How lost and alone she had felt, how impossible happiness had seemed, but love, she had learned, comes in many forms. Sometimes it's gentle, like James's steady devotion. Sometimes it's hard-won, like John's journey to redemption. And sometimes it's unexpected, like Eleanor's fierce grandmother's love. Sophia cooed, in her sleep, reaching out with her tiny hand. Both James and John moved to comfort her, then stopped, sharing a smile. "Together?" James asked. "Together," John agreed. And in that moment, watching these two former rivals now working together to soothe their daughter, Maria knew that sometimes the happy ending isn't about winning or losing. Sometimes it's about finding the courage to love, the strength to forgive, and the wisdom to know that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. The choice to be better than we were yesterday. The choice to put love above pride. The choice to fight not against each other, but for each other. And in the end, that's the only fight that truly matters. The end.